Good morning, everyone. Or is it still the morning? It's just about the morning. Thank you very much for coming down today to Breaking Through's Music Industry Day. Breaking Through is a Arts Council and Cuba Studios funded project across the year to help artists and people like yourselves who want to get into the music industry. Today we're going to be welcoming some industry professionals from all ranges, from managers, agents, social media managers, and all sorts. So we're going to have 3 panels today, 2 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, with some lunch in the middle. Pizza's on me, you're very welcome. Feel free to top up with tea and coffee throughout the day and keep hydrated with cans of water. We are going to be filming today, so that means that after today I'll email you all with the video. We'll edit it down so that you can go back through. If you thought that something was really poignant to you, you can go back through it, and we'll also have that transcribed and sent to you today. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Matt, who will be hosting this panel for us, and he'll introduce our guests. Please join me in welcoming them to the day.
Thank you very much, Louis. My name is Matt Hanna. I'm a Portsmouth resident. I run an independent booking agency based in East London. We represent, called Runway Artists. We represent about 150 touring, international touring artists, from grassroots artists through to artists playing to thousands of people. The company started about 5 years ago off the back of the pandemic. My personal history is I worked for a couple of big independent agencies prior to that, but was made redundant during the pandemic. Sad face. So started Runway at that stage and have been doing that for 5 years. As it happens, I'm leaving the company at the end of the year, so there's only so long I can say that for. But to kind of go freelance and do some other exciting things. Hopefully more things a bit like this. So I'd like to also say thanks for coming. Thanks for coming in the morning. As Louis said, it's not an early start, so limited well-dones for that. People should be up by midday, I guess. But I'll just I'll let my panelists here introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the first panel. So, Amy, would you like to tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming down today. I'm Amy. I run a music marketing agency called Roadie Media. Essentially, I kind of started my career at some of the largest media agencies in the world before moving over and working in the music industry. I've worked for promoters across the likes of artists like Jungle, Noel Gallagher, Mika, and a bunch of others. After that, I was working for some of my favourite music venues, Electric Bristol, Electric Brixton, and NX in Newcastle. Across that, I've worked with artists like Idols, Maruja, Blonde Shell, many more. And off the back of that, I kind of noticed a very big disjointed approach when it comes to marketing for artists and the way that the music industry sees marketing. A lot of the time it feels like a bit of a tick box rather than an actual strategy. So myself and my partner Tom started off Roadie Media back in 2023. We've recently hired our first intern, and our team is starting to grow. We're working with some really cool artists, Max Cooper, Manny D, a bunch of record labels, Mesh, Earache Records, and it's been a really exciting journey so far. So that's a little bit about me.
Cool. Hello, everybody. My name's Gareth. I work at a company called Hanna Management. We're an artist, producer, and record label. So we work with acts from right at the beginning of their career. So we've got an artist called B. Stewart, who Matt represents at the moment, all the way to probably the most famous act that we manage is a band called Madness, who a few of you might know. And then we've got record producers who have worked with everybody from Oasis to David Bowie and Alt J, again, all the way down to sort of up-and-comers that are probably not yet on your radar. And then we've got 3 labels, 2 of which are joint ventures with producers that we manage. And then we've got a label that's sort of a launch pad for our emerging talent. That's basically us.
Great, thank you very much. So this first panel is going to be about kind of building teams and what teams look like around artists. But before we get into building teams, obviously at the start, what should an artist be looking for a team? Well, really, at the start, what should people be focusing on before they even start thinking about building a team? If we start with you, Gareth, because, obviously you come in at a point where people are obviously getting managers, but, so I guess there's a certain amount of work that needs to happen before that.
Yeah, I would say the most important thing for any artist is to try and get a sort of true sense of what they want to achieve and what the end goal is. Because I think as a manager, your main job is to help an artist through their journey. It's sort of to be the glue that holds everything together and to see the big picture. And I think until you're at a point where you know who you are as an artist and what you want to achieve, you don't have to have all of the answers, but you kind of need to kind of have an idea of what the target is that you want to aim at. And so I think for me, the point where you might want to start bringing in a team member and a manager is quite often the first person that you might want. It doesn't always happen in a linear fashion. But I think if you haven't figured that bit out, then there's probably only a limited amount a manager can do, because a manager definitely shouldn't be there dictating what sort of music you should make or who your audience should be. They should be helping you find that and probing and asking questions. But that's probably, in my opinion, the point where you probably want to start chatting to somebody like me, is once you're at that stage, really.
Yeah, that makes loads of sense. I was working with an artist actually up until earlier in the year, and she parted ways with her manager because just at every point there seemed to be a stylistic turn. Each single seemed to have something else. She was still very much figuring out what her music was and who she was in that. And obviously, as you say, that's kind of quite a personal journey and not something that as a professional you want to be shoehorning them into. This isn't K-pop. We're not kind of manufacturing things here. It's very organic, so difficult to work with if artists don't know who they are. Amy, ask you kind of on similar lines, obviously through your professional work, but also you're also an artist and part of a band. At this stage, both professionally and as an artist, then I expect there's a lot that you need to be doing for yourself in terms of basically managing your own work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, from a marketing point of view, I think the most important thing you can do is take some time at the beginning of your artist's career to work out what your brand identity is as an artist, how you want to convey yourself and how you want to be seen by people. I think particularly when it comes to content building and social media management, I think that's something that a lot of artists overlook at the beginning, and it will take up a lot of your time. So I think that's worth keeping in mind, particularly in the early stages. Focus on actually writing the music, have a good music bank ready to go. But then on top of that, focus on building your content. What kind of style content do you want to make? How do you want to speak to your fans? And once you've kind of got that down, when you start working with a manager and start working with a team, you kind of already have a bit more of an understanding of who you are as an artist, which I think creates quite a nice ground level for you to kind of grow from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I can't remember what I was going to say, but yes, no, that makes loads of sense. What would you say to an artist who maybe on those lines, maybe their reference points are artists? Maybe I had this a couple of years ago. An artist said, kind of in terms of social media, we kind of want to go for the 1975 style, which at the time was very minimalist. Obviously there's a strong artistic direction in that, but you can't help feeling it's all very well for the 1975, but if you're a grassroots artist who's just starting out, maybe you've got to take a different approach.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I think this is going to sound like a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but the reality is you've just got to test as much as you can. So try out different types of content. Try yourself talking to the camera about why you created a song, why you created a band around you if you're not a solo artist, what it is that you're trying to create for your fans. And you can try content like that. You can also try sort of live content, performance styles. And I think as well, off the back of that, you can see a lot of the time off of social media what works quite well. Outside of that, I think the most important thing you can do is focus on building a really core following, like your kind of cult following, the people who are going to follow you forever. And a lot of the time that will be friends of friends of friends, or the random Radio 6 listener dad that came to your first show at the local pub who will follow you guys forever. I think making sure that you're tailoring your content to suit those people and also reach wider audiences, I think, is the best way to start. And then once you've kind of got that down, you know what works, you've built a little bit of that core following, that's when you can start taking like the 1975 approach, where you can be a little bit more stylistic with what you're deciding to do, and you've kind of got that intention there already built for you.
Great, thanks. So obviously there's loads then you can do at an early stage to kind of get yourself going. Gareth, let's get into them. When you start building a team, what does that team look like? And obviously you're a manager, so maybe it's worth just you giving kind of a brief overview of what your role does and doesn't include as a manager.
Yeah, well, as a manager, as I said earlier, you sort of essentially you're the glue and the sort of overarching person that probably works closest with the artist to anybody on the team. So early on in an artist's career, that can involve pretty much anything. It really is very, very tailored to who the artist is, where they're at in their journey, who's reached out and wants to work with the artist, and sort of what the budget is that you're working with, and what it is that you're trying to take to market. Are you trying to take anything to market at the beginning? Are you sort of in a development stage? So you can kind of fulfill lots of different roles. So very, very early on, it might be something as simple as just setting up some writing sessions and sort of trying to help develop the songs, because quite often as a manager you might come across an artist that has lots of the boxes ticked, an amazing voice, a great vision, but maybe the songs aren't quite there, or they're at a 7 out of 10, and really before you want to start releasing music you want to get them to an 8 or a 9 so that you can actually capture people's ears, because you only get one chance really to impress people, or maybe you might get lucky and get a second chance, but it's a short window of attention that you get as an artist, so you need to make sure you're making the best first impression. So as the manager, it is just sort of working out which bits of the team do you need to start bringing in, and which bits can you do yourselves. What is your artist really good at? You probably experienced yourself, Amy, some artists are fantastic at social media and don't need a lot of help there. Quite often, I'm in my 40s now, quite often they know more than me about how to work the algorithms on TikTok. So I'm not necessarily the best person to say, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. But I can be a filtering process or a sounding board. Or they might be terrible at it, and it might ring somebody like Amy up and say, I've got this artist, they're brilliant, but they want to do this minimal thing. How do we find their audience by doing that? What can we do that's sort of on brand and in keeping with the overall vision, but helps them find an audience, particularly at an early stage where you might not be getting radio straight away, or getting the dream support or the fantastic festival spot isn't achievable straight away. So you need to find ways to sort of work your way up the ladder to get there. So, yeah, I don't know if that really answered the question, but
no,
it can be anything is the short answer to it.
I think it encapsulates what being a manager, especially at an early stage, is like. Obviously, as you grow your team, you bring in specialists that do different jobs, and we'll get into that and what that looks like in a second. But, yeah, at an early stage, I mean, yeah, it's like having an artist as a manager is like having a child. Yeah, you could be doing anything at any point.
I speak to my artist more than I talk to my wife and my kids.
I guess from my side, obviously, as a booking agent, there's, booking agents I would class as one of the other kind of key members of an artist team as you start to build. And you might correct me on this, but I would say kind of the core of an artist team would be obviously the artist, manager, and then anything else then is that I would consider core is probably non-campaign based. So your accountant and your lawyer, who are there in the background keeping things ticking over, music lawyers. Being a music lawyer is a specific kind of, or an entertainment lawyer is a specific role. Some people assume that when you say, oh, have you got a lawyer, it's because they think you're going to be arrested sometime soon for, some of the sex, drugs or rock and roll that you might be involved in. But a music lawyer is actually a very integral part of a team. Obviously, they oversee every deal that gets done, everything that gets signed. But they're also a great conduit because they're over every deal. They know a lot of people and are very well placed to connect people. Accountants less so. less exciting, the accountants.
Until you're making money, you don't need an accountant.
Yeah, precisely. And then agents kind of are the other, what I would consider, because we're always there, whether you're releasing a record or whether you're between records, whatever you're doing, whether you're starting out, your agent is there, part of your team. You can pick up the phone, you can say, right, this is the plan, this is what we want to do live, and your agent is there to roll it out. And we start with the big picture, we'll consult on strategy, but that then filters all the way down through the booking and making the gigs happen alongside promoters to making sure people get paid and doing the paperwork and stuff like that. So you've got your manager, you've got your agent, you've got your accountant and your lawyer. Then, Amy, as a digital marketer, you've then interacted with various different members of teams. Who are you most, other than managers, who are you most often coordinating with?
That's a really good question. A lot of the time, we're working directly with artists, specifically because if you think about it, a lot of the time an artist does have a team around them. They've got a label, they've got a manager, they've got an agent, they've got a promoter, all of which are kind of running different sorts of marketing for them. The label's focusing on the release, you've got the promoter focusing on ticket sales, and they don't usually communicate very well with one another. So a lot of the time, you as an artist are kind of a bit like, I have no idea what marketing is happening, but I think something's happening. And that's kind of where we step in, is to essentially unify the process across all of those and make sure that the artists are actually getting the growth out of their marketing that they're hoping for. I think for us, a big part of it at the moment, and it's becoming more and more of like a frequent request that we're seeing, is actually growing socials in particular, like how people can grow their numbers, how they can increase their mailing list. These all sound like fairly boring things, but they are very important when it comes to promoters taking a second look at you. People will go on your Instagram, and if you've got 100 followers or 100,000 followers, you'll probably get very different offers, even if that isn't truly representative of the amount of people you can bring into a space. It's unfortunately vanity numbers, but that's the direction that the industry is going in. So rather than working against it, we're trying to make that a little bit more accessible to artists, if that answers your question.
No, not in the slightest, but it was very insightful. But you mentioned promoters, you mentioned labels, so these are kind of other people that work kind of on a more, promoters will be engaged when there's a tour. Promoters don't tend to get involved when there's no tickets to sell. Labels obviously generally work on a campaign basis, although if you're signed to maybe a multi-album deal, there might be some activity between campaigns. So someone like Amy will be kind of keeping things going, keeping the numbers increasing over that time. And obviously, from your point of view, you talk about marketing. Maybe it's useful to kind of put into channels the different sorts of marketing, because you're not talking to radio or print press, are you? So could you maybe just where your lines are drawn and where kind of some of the other marketing functions come in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we specialize in digital marketing specifically. So let's say, for example, if you've released some new music and you've got a music video and you want to promote it and you want to get more streams to the new music that you've just released, our focus is essentially making sure that you've got ads running on YouTube. People are actually going to see your ads, making sure that you've got ads running on Meta, so that's Facebook and Instagram, TikTok as well, Snapchat, Reddit. There are so many different avenues that you can explore digitally. But rather than, I think what we try to do with Roadie is, rather than work sort of sporadically where you've got a release and here's one single and then 6 months later there's another single and we're just putting out marketing bits and bobs. What we try and do is kind of look at a sort of more kind of longer term partnership and how you can kind of continue to build things in between that. So I guess a good example, we've recently been working with a DJ called Max Cooper, and a big goal of ours has been to get his streaming numbers and his social numbers to where they need to be, but also we needed to reach a point where the tour marketing was kind of easy to look after as we kind of moved into bigger venues. So we would release an album, we would do a full pre-album campaign, so making people aware of Max that hadn't potentially heard of him yet, expanding into new territories, trying out new countries, trying out new sort of audiences, and then releasing the music, actually promoting that, and then after that focusing on ensuring that people are ready to kind of return and come back for when we announce the tour. So a big part of that has been like getting people to sign up to mailing lists, and to kind of join Twitch platforms and join Discords and all of these sorts of things. And fortunately for us, we've been working on that over the last few years. And as a result, when Max announced that he was playing at the Royal Albert Hall, we had all of this kind of data collated, ready to go off of the back of years worth of strategy, so that when we announced that tour, it sold out in the pre-sale, which was the most impressive and exciting thing to actually see come to life. But that's why it's important to kind of have a marketing team with you that you kind of use like religiously to ensure that there's a full-scale strategy, rather than just being like, I've got a single, I've released it, it didn't do as well as I hoped, what do I do now? Like, it's taking the time to kind of plan the longer, like the longevity for it, I suppose.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I mean, if you look at other roles in kind of a marketing function, so a radio plugger, for example, if you're going to release singles, you might engage a radio plugger, and it'll be their job to take your singles to radio, and they'll talk to producers or presenters directly, DJs, and try and persuade them to play it, maybe initially just for one-offs, what you call a spot play, and eventually you want it to be on the weekly playlist. So a station like Six Music has an A list, which has the heaviest rotation, a B list, and then a C list, and then things that DJs just play because they feel like it, or because someone has pitched it to them and they've promised to give it a spin. But obviously once they've gone out to producers, if everyone turns around and says, no thanks, we don't like it, or we've already got one of them this week, or for whatever reason it might be, or it's coming up to Christmas and we're playing Jingle Bells all the time, whatever it might be, because it's very subjective a lot of the time. That's kind of that until the next single. Whereas really what you highlight there is that actually from a digital point of view, there's always stuff you can be doing. There's always stuff you can be testing. There's always new ground you can try, and you can keep things moving regardless of whether you're working a single. And I think for new artists especially, that's a really good thing, because you might be tempted just to look at these kind of single points. And it's, from an agent point of view, we try and create those moments, be it gigs and things like that, that you can kind of hang things on, but you need to be working between the peaks, you need to be working still in the troughs, and I think especially at an early stage that could be really valuable in building numbers. Okay, so we've talked a lot about who the people are and what they do. The big question that I always get asked as an agent is when and how do I get an agent? And I'm sure, Gareth, you get asked this a lot as well as a manager. I think from Amy, from what you've said, you've really shown that you can engage with someone like yourself from all different, there's obviously so much you can input, which is amazing. But Gareth, it'd be really interesting to hear, you've said a little bit about the point at which it makes in terms of the artist understanding themselves, but obviously that's not going to be, I'm sure there's artists here that really understand where they are in their art and their craft, but they're not necessarily in the place where you would take a punt on an artist. So what are the other factors that come into that?
What, is in when I would take them on, or when the industry should be ready to take them on?
Both, if they're different, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess when I'm looking to take an artist on, I suppose the main things I'm looking for, as I say, is a sense of self, or if it's a band, a sort of a sense of what the band's identity is and what it is that they're looking to achieve. And then I think you need to build to a stage where you feel like there is something, usually music, hopefully music, that you can use as a calling card to bring the rest of the wider industry in. Like, it's usually a song, but it might be a collection of songs or a release, or something that you've created on social media that's giving people a reason to care about you as an artist more than the millions of other artists out there. I think it's one of the hardest things for any new artist, is that there is a world of amazing music out there that's pretty untapped, and quite often just being a really good musician isn't the thing that sets these pieces of music aside. I'm sure every single person in the room has probably got an artist where you think that they're absolutely amazing and you can't understand why the world hasn't discovered them yet, or why they were never discovered. And it can be a myriad of reasons. So I guess what I'm looking for is to find those artists, usually quite early on, but it doesn't always have to be. You can, I could take somebody on at any stage of their career per se. It just needs to be at a point where I feel like I can add some value to what they're doing. I need to be in sync with what their vision is. That is, as a manager, that is the most important thing. If I don't understand you as an artist and what it is that you want to do and the type of people that you might want to work with, then I'm not the right person to be your manager. And I think anybody that's looking to take on a manager, that is what you should be looking for in a manager. It was a half a joke when I said that I talk to my artists more than I talk to my wife and my kids, but it's barely a joke, if I'm honest. I talk to them every single day, and when we're not on the phone, we're texting each other, usually stupid hours of the night that really annoys my wife. But what you need is that tight relationship with your manager, and so I guess I'm looking for somebody that I feel like I can forge that relationship with, and it's quite a lazy cliche that a lot of people use in the industry, but it is very much like trying to find a partner in a relationship. So you need to be a team and you need to be together. So I guess I'm trying to find those partners to work with, and you as the artist, if you're trying to find a manager, that is the main quality that you want. And then you need to try and find somebody that's going to represent you how you want to be represented. So sort of personality and manner are really big things that you should be looking for in a manager. The rest of their roster does bear a little bit of weight because you need somebody that can open doors and does know people. But more important than that is time, it's energy, and it's somebody that you trust to be in a room talking about you and your music when you're not there to do it yourself, because lots of the people that you work with on your team as it expands are not going to want to have difficult conversations with you. They're not going to, if you've written a song and you think it's the best thing that you've ever written, which pretty much every artist does, when you play it to your record label, if they don't agree with you, they might not want to say that to your face because they want to protect their relationship with you. So they might say a different thing to me than they will say to you. So part of my job is being that filter. It's being that, all right, you're right, record label, maybe this isn't the hit that we all think it is. Do we think it could be reworked? Is it a production thing? Do we need to change producer? Could we bring in another writer and help steer it? Or is this just one that we need to try and steer the artist off of? And then I need to be able to have the difficult conversation with you, which if we're the right partnership together, I will be able to have that, and I'll know that some artists can deal with the cold hard truth, and some need to have a bit of a cushion around its delivery. So I guess I've sort of gone around the houses a little bit in answering your question, but it is just about finding that relationship, and then with the other areas of the industry as you bring them in, it's about finding again the right partners, finding the right booking agent. You probably do look at the roster a little bit more with a booking agent than maybe you would with a manager, because it is probably more about trying to find the person that can help open up the opportunities on the right tours or the right festivals. But again, importantly, you're looking for somebody that's got the energy and the time to push you forward and has the connections to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you touched on some really interesting stuff there. I think the element that you kind of alluded to is you're looking for kind of those little green shoots of something that's happening, aren't you? Those calling cards, whatever it might be, that's going to give you as a manager a chance to kind of take it onwards. As you said, something to work with. It's very hard, from a booking agent point of view. The first thing, people are going to ask, right, when are we going on tour? Well, I've got to pitch you as an artist to promoters and festivals and things like that. It's so much easier for me to pitch an artist if the promoter or the booker, whoever it is, has heard the name from somewhere else, or there's something that they think, oh, I've missed this, but I shouldn't have done. If you're coming to someone and saying they're really great, they've got nothing to show for it, but they're really great. You just haven't, as you said, there's so many other artists out there, and there's so many that you're just trying to elevate yourself, and you're just trying to show why on that bill or whatever it might be for that label who's got, right, we're going to sign 3 artists this year, it's going to be a pop act, we've got all these over here. What's it going to be that makes the difference? But then obviously you talked a lot about relationship, which is such an important element. And it sounds like, I think I would say between the two roles that you both do, that the relationships that you build are different, but there's kind of a middle of the Venn diagram. But it sounds like maybe more so for you, Gareth, that actually there's a lot of relationship to build before you start working together. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I guess there's like a courtship. Like, it's so easy to use the comparison with a relationship, but you have to get to know somebody. And that's true of, as I said earlier, I manage both musician artists and record producers. And with both, there's an element of getting to know each other. It's hanging out, it's going to some shows, it's playing each other music and sort of testing each other's taste a little bit and getting to know each other. And probably during that courtship, you might start to sort of, you have as a manager people whose other opinions you trust and that you think might be good to work with them. So even when a booking agent isn't involved necessarily, there are some promoters that I've got relationships with where I want to see the artist. I might ring them up and just say, hello, can you do me a favour? I've found this person that's got an amazing voice. Can you stick them on a gig? We're going to go under a different name because we're not quite ready to show the world this artist yet, but I need to see them. So it'll be going down and catching the gig, working out what they need, like in terms of development as well. Like the amount of times that probably all of us have heard somebody that's absolutely amazing on record, and you go and watch the show and they can't sing, or maybe they can sing, but they're not putting on a show in any way, because I think that's one thing that particularly early on gets lost with lots of artists. You spend so much time in the studio writing songs, crafting a sound, or even in a rehearsal room learning your craft, learning how to play your instrument. But the important bit, and I guess the bit where we all get involved, is that bit where you're ready to find an audience. So you've got to put on a show. You've got to put on a performance that's going to make people want to come back. You don't want to be an artist that somebody sees once and never comes to another gig. So you need to get all of that right.
Amy, from your point of view, you guys are more of a paid service. Obviously, hopefully we'll have time to kind of get briefly into the money side of things and how people get paid. But yours is more of a paid service that people can... But there must still be... Are you picky with how you choose your clients? It sounds like the relationship going forward is really important so you can do a good job. But do you vet your clients, or is it just a case of if you're willing to pay the money, come on in?
No. It's very much the kind of thing where we always try to at least hop on a call, or ideally meet in person or at a show, and actually get to know the artist. I think you've made a really good point, particularly about the performance itself. I think you can tell a lot about an artist based on how they carry themselves on stage. But I think the most important thing, which you've also touched on beautifully, which is trust. If you can sit down together, have a coffee or have a drink, and you know that you're on the same level, that's like the most perfect way to start building a relationship. I tend to only focus on working with artists who have that kind of drive and that ambition. It's very, very hard to work with artists who sometimes you can be kind of presented with artists who are maybe a little bit entitled. Like, they'll have great music and they're really good, but they're not willing to put in the work. And when you come to someone like me or Tom at Roadie, a lot of the time it will be like, okay, I want to, the 1975 example, I want to be, I just want to post blank squares on Instagram, and I don't want to do TikTok, and I don't want to do this. And it's like, well, I can help you get somewhere with that, but I can't take you past a certain threshold, because unfortunately, whether we agree with it or not, that's the world that we live in now, and that's something that we have to accommodate to. And yeah, so I think it's just super important to kind of have that drive and that relationship. And if you're able to work with artists who are willing to kind of go out and do all of these things and try new things, those are the best sorts of artists to work with. So I'm trying to be a little bit more selective moving forward, which is exciting.
Great. I guess one of the following on questions then is how do you as a maybe aspiring artist, or someone that wants to work in the industry, how do you go about starting to build those relationships at an early point? I mean, from my point of view, I always feel that it's a good process to build a relationship when you're not necessarily expecting something from the other person. If you can start a relationship just by, if you want to play gigs for a certain promoter, turning up at their gigs, trying to find out who the promoter is, meet them, buy them a beer, whatever it might be, just hang out and say hi, be a person to them before you then start saying, oh, we're going to be releasing some music. I personally feel like it's quite important to show that you are taking it seriously and that you're organised in that someone is then going to want to work with you. Is there anything else in terms of kind of networking and building those early relationships that you guys would, advise people at an early stage to do?
Yeah, I think events like this are really helpful. Like, come and, if you want to talk to us, come and speak to us after the event, and we're always more than happy to help. I think going to local shows as well, and even if you're speaking to other people in other bands, everyone kind of builds their own little network around them, which I think is amazing. I think something that can be a little bit intimidating is a lot of the time people who work in the industry are very, very time poor and are very, very busy. So in-person events like these or at shows, like Matt said, is a really, really great way to meet people. But even things like finding the sort of agents, managers, marketers that you want to work with, finding their websites, finding their LinkedIn, sending them messages, and not being afraid to keep messaging. I think a lot of the time, like, we'll receive messages from people and I'll be like, that's a really, really cool point. I want to come back to this. And then I'll get locked in on something else and a week goes by and I'm like, oh my God, I completely forgot. But it's the artists who keep coming back up and they're like, I'm doing this show. Do you want to come? Like, I'm coming to this city. Are you around? Do you want to get a coffee? Can we chat? Like, keep pushing. I don't think anyone in the industry is ever going to be offended by consistency or drive. And if we are, we'll block you. No, I'm kidding. We won't do that. But I think that's really important, is to just kind of keep on us, like, make sure that you find a way in, because I think, yeah, if you can be driven at those early stages, we know for a fact that you're going to be driven throughout the relationship together, which is really important. I
think, yeah, the point about events like this is really valid, in that this is a point at which we are here and our attention is here. We've stepped away from our desks and our inboxes, and it's, there are plenty of other events like this, just like locally. I know in Portsmouth, the Wedgwood Rooms and Casemates run artist development series. There's an event and a series of talks taking place in Southampton under the Parallel brand. There's loads of spaces now where you can go and actually interact with people, because the time thing is a big thing, and actually being a human to someone, I think, initially massively increases your chances of them coming back to you on an email, because a lot of people are very selective about the emails that they respond to. A lot of people have a lot of unread emails in their inboxes, or they delete them, I guess, after a while. I don't know, get to the end of the year and just have a cull, I don't know. But yeah, I think that's really interesting. How are we doing for time? I can't see. Louis, how long we got? 5 minutes? I want to make sure there's space for questions if people have got some. So we'll just very quickly just explain kind of the difference in how we all get paid, because I think that's an interesting, or not an interesting, it's a crucial bit of, I think, and I would preface that by saying that there are some roles that if people want money in advance, that is a big red flag. And there are other roles where you are paying for a service, and therefore it's expected that you will pay upfront. And we have probably a good example of that delineation here. And so, Gareth, how do you get paid?
Managers should always get paid on a commission basis. There are certain points once you formalise your relationship with your manager, you usually do a contract which will go through a lawyer. But it's usually 20%, and the points of negotiation are just at what point that's calculated. So whether it's 20% off the top, nearly always it's not. So it's usually 20% after certain costs, and sort of what those costs are the points of negotiation. And I would say if any manager asks for money up front, that is the biggest red flag. I don't know any reputable manager that works on that basis. Perhaps if you're at an arena level or above and you're generating so much money, maybe you could put your manager on a salary. But I don't know anybody that would agree to that, if we're completely honest. No,
and I mean, it's the same for booking agents. We don't get paid until the show has happened and you've been paid. We do get paid on the gross fee. So if your fee for a show is £100, we technically commission 10% of that. I mean, we wouldn't always. It's better spent on a couple of meal deals quite often. But it's that's, there are roles there where you should be. Yeah, the people providing those services should only be getting paid at the point that you're getting paid as an artist. But obviously slightly different for marketing. We talked about some other roles as well, PR, record radio pluggers, that sort of thing. So at what stage would you expect to pay a marketing?
We are completely different. We usually take payment up front, which goes against literally everything that you've said. But it's a very different scenario for marketing, particularly because when you're running paid marketing, let's say you've got a budget of £200, if we don't get paid up front, we are spending £200 out of our pocket, and you may leave the country and never come back, which is a very, very scary thing for us as a marketing agency. So we do usually take payment up front. The way that we get paid, it really varies from project to project. So typically, if we're kind of like working on like a longer term strategy, it will be like a monthly retainer, which is pretty common now. Otherwise, if we're working on paid specifically, we'll usually take around a 20% commission. If we're running social media management, that will depend on the size of the artist, the consistency, what they're looking for. Are we also filming content? Are we also writing the copy? There's so many different variables. I think the important thing to note is there are lots of different agencies out there, so it's worth, like marketing agencies specifically, it's worth going ahead and doing your research. There are some that are very rinse and repeat. Just figure out what it is that you want out of your relationship with your marketing agency or with your marketer before you kind of go ahead. But the way that we operate is it's trying to keep things as sort of cost efficient as possible. As musicians ourselves, we know the struggle is real. So, you know, we're here to make sure that we can help you guys get by as much as ourselves. So it's about that two-way street. And like you've said as well, it's very much a relationship that you're building, hopefully for the long term, because that's when you get the best results.
I've got two kind of connected questions then. Obviously, you've talked from a position of a marketing and a professional. At an early stage, do you think it would be maybe wise, especially if you're an artist who's not that interested in social media? My thought would be that maybe you just find a friend who's really good at that stuff and you try and work with them. Is that a valid way of kind of going about it?
Absolutely, yeah, particularly at the very beginning when it comes to social media management, for sure. When it comes to actually growing that and running the sort of ads and strategy side of things, which I think is really important and quite a big superpower that artists can have if they decide to focus on brand building strategy before actually releasing music, like actually building up their brand before that. That's where someone like us would step in, focusing more on sort of like the ad side of things, trying to build your mailing list, trying to actually build those followers. But definitely, like if you've got a friend who's really good at like making TikToks or has a really good time like filming you guys in the studio, like that's super important for building like the kind of building blocks of the socials and helping you figure out what your online identity is going to be. But then when it comes to kind of taking that next step and or wanting to be prepared ahead of that next step happening, that's where we can kind of step in and give you some advice.
And so, Gareth, I guess if you're working with friends and people then there's no need for anything like contracts.
There are.
I was really hoping that's what you were going to say. Why is it important to have it all written down?
So really a contract or a management, well, any contract in the music industry should be seen as like a blueprint of how you deal with every single scenario that might be presented. So as Matt alluded to earlier, one of the early relationships that you might have, sometimes before, sometimes after, is with a lawyer. And the lawyer will have to be completely independent of management, because the one contract that we can't negotiate on your behalf is the contract between us and you. The contract is just so important so you can define all of those boundaries. Like for a live fee, at what point do you commission, and what is included if it is based on the net amount and not the gross amount? What can you include in those costs? What's a touring cost? Because quite often those things overlap. So if you're employing somebody like Amy, who might work across your album campaign but also your tour, how much of that can you contribute to your touring costs, and how much is that a label cost? And as a manager, where do you work that out when you're working out what your commission should be? So yeah, the contract is absolutely vital for all of that. A manager's contract usually isn't the longest term contract that you'll have. It will be a rolling thing, so you might have an initial fixed term, but that's kind of more of a getting to know each other period. and then after that you'll have a notice period. So it's very, very similar to being in a relationship, where if you're not happy in a relationship, then usually it ends. But that's another point where the contract's really important, because there will be work that you've done during the term that you have worked together, and part of what that contract defines is called a sunset clause. It's how long you can commission that for. Like, if you've worked with an artist that's very successful, hopefully the recordings that they've made will generate money for the life of copyright. So how long as a manager can you commission that, and how long can you justify it, which is something that the lawyer will argue on your behalf. Try and get that as low as possible, and as a manager you will try and get that as high as possible, because we do hopefully deserve to be paid for our work at some point. And the point where you're generating money from the work that you've done together is that point. So
yeah, I think my kind of only thing to add then to that is that, especially when you're first kind of working with people and things like that, a lot of the time it's very, especially you get on well, especially if you're working with friends or people that you've known for a long time, it's very hard to imagine anything other than a good working relationship with that person. But actually what contracts do a lot of the time is that they give you a way out for when that relationship turns sour and things become more difficult, because it's very easy for we to say, oh, I gave you this video, if this video does really well and gets loads of streams, maybe you'll give me a bit more money. And Gareth will go, yeah, all right then. But when that actually starts to happen and the money's pouring in, and I say, oh, where's that extra cash you promised to give me? And Gareth's like, oh yeah, I'll give you 100 quid. Well, you've made thousands, and the relationship sours, and you're not in a position to have that friendly negotiation. That's the point at which contracts really come into their own, and that's why, you know, even in terms of setting up a company with my business partner, there's way more devoted to it, you know, if things go wrong and we fell out and we had to part our ways, and what would happen, and, you know, or if I died, you know, or other, you know, really, you know, joyful scenarios. So yeah, no, I would thoroughly echo the importance of having some sort of agreement, and especially if you're working with friends or it's early stages, you know, back of a fag packet can do, if you say, oh yeah, if we get this, then I'll give you a few extra quid. Just write it down and keep a record of it. We'll have some questions very shortly. Before we do that, just wanted to see, we talked about the kind of money up front thing being a huge red flag. Any other kind of big no-nos for both of you in terms of working relationships and who you would work with?
For me, I guess the most important thing that I'm looking for when I'm trying to sign a new artist is ambition. I think for me, it's a massive red flag if I'm more ambitious than the artist. Like, just complete no-no. If I'm there going, right, I want to get you to the stage where you could be headlining Reading and Leeds Festival in 10 years' time, and they're going, you know what, I really like playing at the Wedgwood Rooms, and that's the extent of my ambition, then I'm probably not the manager for you, if I'm honest. Like, the Wedgwood Room's great, and it will be part of the journey, and it might even, like, even with Madness, they're from Camden originally, and if you go to the Dublin Castle in Camden, there's a blue plaque outside there that sort of highlights the significance of their relationship there and how it's become part of British heritage. And occasionally, when we're doing an album campaign, we might factor in a secret gig at the Dublin Castle. So there's no reason why you can't go back. But when we as a company took Madness on about 25 years ago, they'd obviously been a very successful band already up until that point. But they were at a stage where their career was starting to slow down a little bit, and our ambition was to grow their live business, and they're now bigger live than they've ever been. And they had never had a studio #1 album. They'd had greatest hits that were #1s. So their last album was their first ever #1 album. So you've always got to have ambition, and I think that is the biggest red flag to me, because I think everything else can kind of be worked out. But if you're not shooting at the same goal, if you don't have the same ambition, then I don't think that, I'm sure the same is true with both of you guys. I don't think you can work with anybody.
Yeah, I would say now that the artist being driven and being self-motivated is one of the biggest things you need in a team, because as we've said already, there are so many artists out there, there are so many people doing the same thing that you are doing and making music that is as good as you are making. If you're not driven and you don't really want it, then how are you going to get other people around you to advocate for you and champion your music? So, Amy?
I would say a red flag is if you haven't done your research. a lot of the time we'll have artists who will come to us and they'll be like, yeah, we think we should run some marketing. I don't know why, people just tell us that we should, and it seems a bit expensive, so, sell it to me. And it's like, no, like that's not how this dynamic, can be its most beneficial. I think taking the time away to understand what it is that you want out of yourself as an artist and where you want to go and how you want to grow, and actually taking a look into some marketing campaigns, like to figure out what artists that you aspire to are doing, what are they doing, how are they doing it, why has it worked for them, and then coming to people like us and I suppose doing your research on the marketers you are speaking to. Do you trust them? Do they seem trustworthy? Because I'm biased, but I think I'm quite trustworthy. Hopefully when you come to me and you're having a conversation with me, then I can be like, you need to be doing these things. This is exactly what you need to be doing. If you're willing to give it a go because you've done your research, you know that that's probably the right way to go, then we're laughing. But yeah, a red flag to me is when people come to me and say, sell it to me. It's like, well...
Yeah, I think especially when you're kind of cold calling, the equivalent, emailing out to people to try and, just get your foot in the door and say, oh, I'm looking for a booking agent, I'm looking for a promoter. If you're emailing a promoter who, unbeknownst to you, because you haven't done your research, only promotes, jazz, and you're like, hey, come and book our hardcore band, we'd really love to work with you. Obviously that email's going straight in the bin. Same with me, if you email me and you're like, oh yeah, we're a jazz funk fusion band, we sound like nothing you've ever heard in your life, that's not a good line to use. Also, I hate that line. That's not what I do. Like, I'm not going to read the story or whatever it is you've put in. I'm not going to listen to the music because you've obviously not looked at what I do, because no one will look at my roster and think, oh yeah, he's the man for my jazz funk fusion band. So. Oh dear,
I was going to play you a new band tomorrow, Matt.
Oh, well, that listening session will have to wait. But yeah, I think just doing your research, and a lot of the information is out there on the internet. If you look at who is promoting the artist that you like, who represents the artist you like, most of that, you go on an artist website, go to their contact page, there's quite often the agent listed, the manager listed, all that sort of thing. So the information is out there. We have got maybe a couple of minutes for a couple of questions. So if anyone's got a question, stick your hand up. Louis, where did that mic go? He's got it.
Hello. This is for all of you. I was wondering, say like two artists are on the same sort of level and they're doing the same sort of thing. Are you more likely to kind of take this, for all of you, are you more likely to kind of take on an individual with like a backing band, like a regular session backing band, or a band as a whole, if that makes any sense? Are you more likely to take on
from a booking agent point of view, it makes no difference whatsoever. I mean, if it's going to be the same number of you on stage, it's more about the quality and how scalable it is and kind of what the potential is for it. I imagine it maybe weighs a bit more on the minds of you guys, but a little bit.
I would say it's maybe something you think about, but ultimately the differential is going to be the quality of the music. It might be that I'm sounding out some people whose opinions that I trust as well, and that might be what, if I can't decide between two artists and I know that I've only got a finite of time of myself to give, I might play it to some friends that I trust, and that will probably swing it one way or the other. I think the rest of it you kind of figure it out along the way, because there's pros and cons of both.
I'd say from a marketing point of view, it would be marginally better to have a full band. Main reason being is when it comes to sort of, again, conveying your band identity to people, a lot of the time people don't really associate with a band in general. They'll associate with a person in the band or people within the band. And if you've kind of got a solid set of people that you can rely on to create content and actually market them as people, it's a little bit easier, and it's easier for people to consume, particularly the larger you get. But that's only that's a marginal thing, and genuinely, so long as you've got at least one consistent person within it, you're absolutely fine.
It's obviously there's a small cost consideration. Session musicians are going to be more expensive than band members, but that's it's
until you
hairs,
get massive,
really.
and then
and then you're all taking a slice. So yeah. Anyone else?
So my question was, how do we actually go about finding bookers or marketers or managers or anything like that? Obviously, we know how to approach them, but not so much actually how to find them. Like, is there a website, or do we just go on Instagram and search promoters or something like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because it's what makes the industry feel like a bit of a black box, because you don't necessarily know where to start. The information is all out there. It's just about where to start. For example, there's a number of trade magazines and websites that are just becoming familiar with names of going. So there's Music Week, for example, or from a live point of view, there's IQ magazine. You've got Music Business Worldwide, CMU that featured Amy within its pages only recently as one of their stars of the future, something like that. Yeah. Anyway, she's bashful now. But yeah, I think it's a good place to start a kind of industry publications, and just kind of get used to see some of the names. Obviously, then Google the names as you see them as they come up. As I said, artists are often a good pointing kind of signpost for it. Going on artists' websites, looking at the contact information. You'll see some of the people there sometimes. Posters. Often tour posters will have at the top, they will have the name of the promoter in association with, and in association with will normally be with the booking agency. So for example, it will be Crosstown Concerts in association with Runway Artists. Crosstown Concerts will be your promoter, Runway Artists will be your booking agent. And then once you've found the name, getting contact details isn't too hard. But yeah, I completely appreciate it knowing where to start in terms of finding that information can be a little bit tough. There's also a website that a lot of the industry uses called Roster, R-O-S-T-R, and that has like a free tier where you can just go and search anything. So you can search for the artist, and it will list most of their teams. So the free tier only lets you search about 9 people a month or something like that. But it's a really good place to start.
I would just to add to that, I would say one of the most important things that a lot of artists don't do is make yourself findable. I think probably I can speak for all of us, where we discover somebody that we think is amazing, and you can't find a contact for them, and it's so annoying. And particularly as a 40-year-old bloke, if I'm finding a young female singer, I don't want to be jumping in her DMs and getting lost, because it looks really creepy. So if you want to attract somebody in the music industry, make sure that you're there to be found. And because that is, I think we're all probably would say the same thing, the most attractive thing in this industry is finding something yourself. We've all got egos in this industry, record labels, booking agents, marketeers, managers. So finding something yourself and discovering it often is when you're the most passionate. And as an artist, if somebody finds you and thinks that you're amazing, when you're trying to pick who your manager should be, or who your booking agent should be, or your marketeers should be in the different areas, the one that comes to you puts so much more weight in their box. Obviously still look at their roster and how you talk to them and how you interact and how much they cost and all that. But if they've come to you, they probably really want to do it, and that's so important.
Yeah, I could talk till the cows come home about that, because I think it's such an important thing. And I think being intentional about the team you want to build and the relationships you want to build comes down to, if you're playing a gig for a promoter who is booking touring bands, say to that promoter, we're thinking about getting an agent. Have you got any recommendations? Or even better, could you recommend us to someone, so that they then get an email from someone they trust, and they listen to it and they think, this is really good. I'll drop them an email on their easily findable email address. Because then, the power dynamic in that, anyone can email a booking agent and say, take my band on. And lots of them do. We've got a whole inbox full of that. If you've got someone coming to you, if you've managed to put in the time and the effort, the relationships, that means that people are coming to you, then you're really doing something right at that stage. I think on that note, we will have to wrap up for a short break before the next panel. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to Gareth and to Amy. They'll both be around for a little bit, but yeah, give them a round of applause.
Thanks, Matt.